Welcome. I'm Mark Boyden. I am the IT cowboy for Knowbility. I wear a few other hats too. We are a small but mighty nonprofit in Austin, Texas. You are welcome to be a digital ally. You are here for the Equalize Editor, a web app for Braille math document translation. And I'm pretty excited to see this one today too myself. A little bit about Knowbility. This Be a Digital Ally program is a monthly program with the goals of covering the basic skills and principles behind accessible digital design and to make digital content accessible to people with disabilities, which is effectively our overall mission. And the audience is content creators of any skill level and those newer to accessibility because those are the people that are interfacing with the people who want the content. Thank you for letting us be a part of your journey. We always strive to have an inclusive and accessible space here at Be a Digital Ally in all our events and programs. We ask that we all be kind, polite, and respectful of each other and to ensure accessibility. A little bit about Knowbility before we get started. We're an award-winning leader in digital accessibility. As I said, our mission is to create an inclusive digital world for people with disabilities. Founded in 1999, about 26 years ago, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in Austin, Texas, and operate globally. These are our primary community programs. The Accessibility Internet Rally, which is a hackathon, I'll tell you about a little bit more in just a moment. Access U, which is our upcoming digital accessibility conference. And Access Works, which is a community program that brings people with disabilities who want to do real world testing for payment. We bring them together with those who need it. We do K-12 digital accessibility and this program, Be a Digital Ally. The Accessibility Internet Rally was our key program we started a little over 26 years ago before Knowbility became a thing. We bring together web developers with nonprofits, artists, and musicians. They work together to develop a website. Along the way, we train the web developers how to build digital web media and technologies. It's an 8-week accessibility program that ended a few weeks ago. The sites are being judged by our judges because it's a fun, competitive program. The winners actually get tickets to our conference, and we have an award ceremony coming up January 15th. And if you're interested, you're welcome to join us for that program, either online or in person. For more information, you can go to knowbility.org/air about this great program. But I recommend everybody tell everyone about it because it's great for nonprofits and artists and musicians who need websites, and it's great for the web developers, and the cost of entry is extremely minimal. We also have our training conference coming up in May. Always an exciting time where we bring hundreds of people together to learn about digital accessibility. It's a hybrid event where you can fully participate online or in person in Austin, Texas at the St. Edward's University campus. For more information on that, knowbility.org/accessu. We are in that time of year where we're doing an end of year fundraiser. We'd appreciate if you would support our work. You and everybody like you are what keeps us going to be able to make this work happen. And we have improved technology access for millions with disabilities in our 25 years. Our programs are free, like this program, very low cost, like AIR, and provide scholarship opportunities like Access U. Tech equity relies on support of the whole community. You are part of that community. Please give to our year-end fundraiser at knowbility.org/donate. And together we'll create a more accessible digital world. The other way that we bring in a little bit to cover what you and me and everybody else together can't help make it cover, we provide some services. So we work with corporations, government institutions, and anybody else that needs that assistance in accessibility testing and auditing. So we can audit your website and take a look at how that all works and what needs to be fixed and help you figure out how to get it fixed. We also work with teams and management to develop leadership and strategic consulting aspects. We work with teams and build training programs or bring in already pre-built programs. Told you a little bit about Access Works, but the corporations, governments, and people who need this assistance are who come to us and looking for people who can do real world testing by people with disabilities. We also offer an accessibility help desk where you can buy blocks of time and contact us as needed to get assistance on any of your digital accessibility needs. Later on the program, right afterwards, I'll ask you to give some feedback. I just want to remind you to stick around briefly so you can grab this QR code, or you can take it now. The URL is knowbility.org/BADA survey, BA Digital Ally Survey, BADA. And you can stay connected with us. We have a monthly newsletter we put out, knowbility.org/subscribe. You can follow us on all the social medias, and you can always email us at events@knowbility.org. Next month in January is creating PDF forms. It will be led by Tina Franklin, who is our Director of Community Programs and a PDF accessibility expert. Now, a little bit about how we'll handle things in this program, and then we'll get started. You can ask your questions anytime in the Q&A. Down along the bottom of your application screen, there are a bunch of buttons, and there is a Q&A button. You will also, if you'd like, you can ask in person. If you raise your hand, we will, if you raise your hand, and that is in the panel items or the menu at the bottom, it's under React, and then you'll find a raise hand label. And if you do that, we'll find a place and recognize you to be able to unmute and ask your question in person. You can also type them in the chat if that's the only place you can get to us with. So at this point, I'd like to present to you the man who created this wonderful thing and has brought it forth to all of us. So Sam, I'd like to turn it over to you. I introduce you to Sam Dooley. Take it away, sir.
Thank you so much, Mark, for the opportunity to present the Equalize Editor. Let me just make sure that I can share my screen here. There. Not going to be a whole lot of slides, but I did want to put up a title slide so everybody knows, yes, you're in the right place. I'm going to be talking about the Equalize Editor, which is a web application for Braille math document translation. And see if I can switch to my contact information. This will be around in the background, but I'll also bring it back up near the end of the talk. But now you've seen the entirety of my slides today, because the rest of the talk today will be a demonstration of the Equalize Editor. So I'm going to switch to my web browser. I happen to be using Google Chrome, but any other browser should be able to do. The URL that I'm using is lakepinesbraille.com/EE. This is the website where the Equalize Editor is hosted. The Equalize Editor is a free web-based application that allows Braille professionals to create, translate, remediate, and deliver Braille accessible interactive documents using UEB contracted text and Nemeth Braille math. And we're going to, as we'll see today, the user interface allows both sighted and Braille users equal access to the online math content, both in the authoring/creation phase and also in the consumption, reading the document and being able to modify the document in interesting ways. So just by way of visual description, to give people a little bit of context, the Equalize Editor contains a large input area, which operates as a normal visual editor. Outside of the input area, above the input area, and afterward in the tab order, there is a series of quick bar buttons for things like plus and minus and times and divide that have tooltips, both in text and in Braille. And if I get to the end of the quick bar, I get access to a set of sidebar panels that include expandable panels, which contain even more operations, and we'll talk about those as we go through. Before the input area in the tab order, there's also a set of application menus: file menu, drive menu, edit menu, view menu, help menu, and we'll cover some of those as we go through the demo. Also on the screen below the input area is a visual panel that displays the Braille equivalent of everything that's in the input area. So if I want to create Braille using the Equalize Editor, I can just type in plain text. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. And as I type in plain text, the Equalize Editor converts it to contracted UEB and displays it in the Braille panel and echoes that to any attached Braille display that your screen reader is communicating with. I could also switch to home row key entry mode and use the home row keys of my computer keyboard to type Braille in a similar way. So I could type .6 THE, QK for quick, BROWN, and as I type each word, the Equalize Editor will type whatever Braille I type in and convert it into uncontracted text to put into the document. If I can type the Braille today, I'm typing the same letter over and over, MPED. And this is how you know that it's a real demo, is that you're going to get typos and stuff like that as I go along. OVER, and so on. The LAZYDOG. And clearly my Braille typing is not nearly as fast as my QWERTY typing. But the idea is that whether I'm typing as a sighted user using a computer keyboard, or whether I'm typing in Braille using the Braille keyboard, I'm creating the same content here in text in both cases. So if I come up here to the File menu and say Alt-Shift-F, V for View, S for Source, what I see is that this document is represented in HTML. So I see an HTML paragraph for the text for the first line I typed in, and an HTML paragraph for the second line that I typed in. And they're exactly the same paragraph. I can't tell at this point which one I typed in Braille and which one I typed in as a sighted user. I could do the same thing with math. I'm going to remove this second line because I don't only need one of them. But if I want to type Control-Alt-M, I can type visual math that then is going to be converted to Nemeth Braille on the fly. So if I type Y equals V_0, close parenthesis, T plus 1/2, close parenthesis, AT squared, I get a simple equation that might just represent the vertical motion of that quick brown fox as he jumps over the lazy dog. And as I type in that equation, it appears in Nemeth here in this bottom panel, and therefore on the Braille display at the same time. Now, just like I can type in text using Braille, I can also type in the math using Braille as well. If I switch back to home row key mode, I can say that I want a displayed equation by entering the begin Nemeth indicator. And now I have a displayed math equation, and I can type in Y, 2 Braille cells for equals, V subscript 0.5 to return to baseline, T plus open fraction 1/2.5 to return to baseline again. I could also have typed the close fraction indicator at that point. A T superscript 2 return to baseline. And I've typed a math equation both as a sighted user and as a Braille user. And when I create these equations, whichever way that I create it, again, going back to the document that's being produced, in this case, the document that's being produced still has that paragraph that we created earlier, but now in the second paragraph, we have a bit of markup that's encoded in MathML. That's a very special kind of MathML called Content MathML that I'll explain in a moment. But once again, regardless of which way I typed it in, I've got two paragraphs now that have the same markup in them, and I can't tell whether I created them using the sighted user interface or using Braille. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make it to where I only have one of these. I don't need two copies of this equation. Now, going back to this source markup, if you've encountered Content MathML before, then that's going to be very unusual. If you've encountered MathML at all, what you've probably encountered is something called Presentation MathML, which represents the way that math symbols are written on a page. So it's very good at creating a pretty picture of the math but not very good at telling you what the math means. Content MathML is an XML markup that's part of MathML that represents things like equals, plus, times, subscript, divide, power, and so on, that tell you something about the formula that's being created. And so when you get done creating content in MathML using the Equalize Editor, what you get is an unambiguous representation of the formula. You can get that using as a sighted user, treating it as a visual math editor, or you can get it using Nemeth Braille. And again, in either case, the formula that's created is displayed visually for the sighted user, and it's also displayed in Braille for the Braille user. And either method creates content MathML in HTML context. So the Equalize Editor allows visual users to create Braille documents and Braille users to create visual documents using an accessible authoring process. It creates Braille accessible interactive documents so a sighted teacher can create accessible documents without using Braille that a Braille student can read. And a Braille student can create visual documents using only Braille that a sighted teacher can read. Now, if I wanted to continue this example a little bit, I could turn back into QWERTY entry mode so I can type this a little faster. And I could say, well, in this equation, I want to explain it a little bit. I can say Control M, V sub 0. Control M to exit math mode is the initial velocity. If I could type today, if I could spell. A is the acceleration of gravity. And well, what is the acceleration of gravity? Let's see. If I remember right, that's minus 9.8 meters per second squared. End of math, comma, and t is the elapsed time. So now I've got a little mini lesson that I could entitle a basic equation of motion. I could say Control-Alt-1 to turn this first line into an H1 title. And then when I look at the source file for this document, I've got my header. I have my paragraph that has only text in it. I have the paragraph that includes only math in it. And then I have another paragraph that contains both text and math interleaved, represented in HTML plus content MathML. This is great. So now I can save this file. I'm going to save this as source. I'm going to call this foxmotion.equation editor, because it will save the content markup and HTML markup needed to represent the document and load it back in. Then I could take this document, I'm going to go ahead and replace the version that's there, and share it with someone else that can also run this program. Just log into the website. I could go File, Open, navigate to that file and open it, and now I've got this file loaded back in. And so now the student can read this document either as a sighted student or as a Braille student and understand what happens when the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Now, if I'm an instructor and I want to make a little bit of a quiz out of it, I could come in here and say, well, maybe I want to remove some of this, see if I can make this work. And I'm going to use an omission symbol to fill in these words. That V0 is, well, I don't remember what V0 is anymore. I don't remember what A is. I don't remember what T is. And so that's going to be kind of a mini quiz for the students, where that if I distribute this document, let's save that as the quiz. I'm going to replace it. And when the student loads that in, they have the opportunity to navigate here to these omission symbols and fill in. Let's see, what was V0? It was the acceleration gravity. No, it wasn't. See, I've already got my own quiz wrong. That's why you know it's a real demo. V0 is the initial velocity. A is the acceleration of gravity. And T is the elapsed time. And so you can imagine giving a quiz to a student who reads Braille, not having typed a single Braille cell, send the quiz to the student, and have them return it to you in real time or near real time. It's kind of hard to give a pop quiz if it takes a week to prepare the pop quiz out of line. The student will see it coming. So a sighted teacher can share this simple quiz with a Braille student or a sighted student without having to code the Braille themselves. And now the Equalize Editor then creates Braille accessible documents from visual or Braille math notation using keyboard input and produces print and Braille output presentations that are accessible to either audience. It also provides editing tools to allow you to remediate common classes of visual math tool limitations and do all the kinds of interactions that you would hope to do with a visual math editor, but you can control it all within Braille. Now, the Equalize Editor can save output files that contain lots of different markup formats. We've already seen the source markup used by the Equalize Editor as HTML plus content mathml. You can also look at the HTML markup produced by the Equalize Editor, which includes HTML plus mathml that is ready for display inside a web browser. Well, we're inside a web browser. Why don't I just take and preview that HTML? And now I've got a dynamic web page that is the basic equation of motion that we just typed in. And not only that, I can tab to the math and get all the MathJack support that I might want from the web page that I just created dynamically. And you didn't have to use any of the math markup to be able to make that happen. Now, if I can create that kind of a web page, I could also print it as HTML, or by just invoking the print dialog from the browser. So it says, here's my document, and I can either save it as PDF, or if I happen to be connected to the right network, I might be able to connect to my printer that's at my house, and I can go ahead and print that off. Exactly the way that MathJax will display it. In addition, you can also produce BRF files. So if you're watching the output here from a basic equation of motion, and you see that this is computer Braille, and if you can read this computer Braille, my condolences to you. It's a little bit tough to read, but there's a knack to it. Certain symbols are mapped to Braille patterns, and you can learn to recognize that the open curly brace is the OW contraction and so on. And this is the same BRF notation that you could then send to a Braille embosser. So if your technology is aligned correctly and you've done all the right connections and so forth, you can say print BRF. And if you have a Braille embosser on the list of your printers, then you could send this BRF file directly to your printer. In most cases, what you'll want to do is take the BRF file, save it to a file, and load it inside another program like Duxbury that's more familiar with how to communicate to your embosser. You can also preview a BRL file, which uses a SimBraille font to display the actual Braille contents in a visual form, so that if you're a sighted user and you want to copy edit the Braille that's being produced, you can look through this before you imagine sending it to your embosser. So with all these different file formats, the Equalize Editor Braille workflow supports the standard Braille formats that can be used by other well-known Braille tools and devices, so that you can get the document that you want to create into the Braille format that you need and deliver it to the location where you need it to deliver it to. So far, we've taken a look at the use of the Equalize Editor with the file system. You've seen me use file open, file save, which writes to your local machine. You can also interact with Google Drive. So if I say drive open instead of file open, Google will authenticate me as what user I want to use, and then it will connect me to the folder picker where I can navigate to whatever file that I want to open. I'm going to go back and open a copy of foxmotion.exe as I saved it over to Google Drive, and that this is a convenient way to distribute to other Google Drive users. So this file is now on Google Drive. I could now save it on Google Drive, and I want to select a folder to save into. And once I select that folder, there, I want to select the folder. It will ask me for a name of the file, and then I can save it off into that file. I want to cancel out of that. In addition, the Equalize Editor can be integrated into the Google Drive user interface. So if I say help samples, it will bring up the Google Drive user interface using my user. And I have my Google Drive folder that has some files that I created for the purpose of this demo. And I can come in here and select one of them and say that I want to open that with the Accessible Equation Editor. And it will open that document in a new window. So in addition to being able to use file system, you can also use Google Drive to get to these files and to share them with others. All right. Unwinding some of that. So that you can add the Equalize Editor as an app to Google Drive so that it will allow you to open these files from the Google Drive user interface. Alternatively, you can use the Equalize Editor Drive menu to open and save files contained in your Google Drive space. And using the Equalize Editor with Google Drive provides a convenient shared workflow between sighted teachers and Braille students. I'm fully aware that Google Drive itself is not the most accessible user interface, but with better integration for these kinds of tools, we can mitigate that somewhat. All right, any questions so far before I move on to the next portion of the demo?
So Nancy asks, can a screen reader use it with any OS and screen reader? How is a screen reader user's location indicated?
How is the screen reader's location indicated? Well, the Equalize Editor works inside of a web page as an application. And so there are special ways that the screen reader interacts with forms and other controls and applications within a web page. And I wish I could say that I can predict what exactly a screen reader is going to do at any one particular time with those. But if you're familiar with forms mode in a screen reader, that's the kind of technology that will happen. And as often as possible, the Equalize Editor will be in control of the location that is displayed on the Braille display. And this is true both using different browsers, Chrome, IE, Firefox, on Mac, Safari, and on Chromebooks, Google Chrome, of course. All of these browsers have ways of interacting with applications running inside of a web page, and the Equalize Editor will take advantage of those facilities to do that. I know that doesn't completely answer your question, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of an introduction to the kinds of things that we're going to be able to do. Other questions?
The other question, which you may be covering here in a little bit, is can you take plain text math from some other source and paste it here?
That is absolutely a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. I'm sorry that I somehow gave you a copy of the notes that I'm using so that you can see what I'm going to do next. But let me make a transition now and talk about math that can be retrieved from other programs. So I'm going to start with Microsoft Word. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Word, here's a document that I created using Microsoft Word just by looking at Microsoft's insert equation drop-down box, which contains a list of about 9 or so sample equations that can be created using Microsoft's equation editor. It's got the area of a circle, binomial theorem, expansion of a sum, Fourier series, Pythagorean theorem, quadratic formula, Taylor expansion, and a couple of trig identities now at the end. And you can select any one of these and have it be inserted into a Microsoft Word document. Or you can use the Microsoft Word equation editor to create these yourself. Now, I'm not truly a user level expert on Microsoft Word's equation editor, but there are a couple of things that I can do with it. So if, for example, I select this first equation, the area of a circle, a equals pi r squared, and copy it to the clipboard using Control C, then what that does is copies. You remember we talked about presentation math ML before? It copies the presentation math ML that Word produces to the clipboard. And so I could type Windows V and look at this first piece of markup for that equation. Oh, and it looks like I added another copy, which I did not intend to do. Go back to that. You can see that it begins with angle bracket math equals, and this is the same presentation ML that we were talking about before. But the Equalize Editor doesn't rely on presentation math ML. It needs the content math ML. Well, let's see what we can do with it. I'm going to copy that equation to the clipboard. I already did that. I'm going to move back to the Equalize Editor. I'm going to type Control V. And sure enough, the Equalize Editor is able to take the presentation math ML that was on the clipboard. It was able to convert it from presentation math ML into content math ML and render that equation in content math ML, A equals pi r squared, and in Nemeth Braille. And I didn't have to type any Braille. I just had to copy and paste. I know that Word probably doesn't have a whole lot of knowledge of Nemeth Braille. If you put it with a screen reader, it probably has more. And I know that there are add-ons to Microsoft Word that help it work with Duxbury and so forth. But to me, it's much more convenient just to be able to copy and paste. And so I could continue on here. I could take this binomial expansion, copy, paste, and I got a summation there. I've got an infinite series for 1 plus x to the n. Oh yes, and here's my Fourier series that has both summations, cosines, and sines, and a lot of parentheses and other expressions. Good old Pythagoras shows up and gives us a very simple equation. And for each of these equations, I'm taking the presentation markup that Microsoft Word is producing and converting it to content markup and thereby to Nemeth Braille. Some of these tough ones down here include interesting operator precedences involving trigonometric functions. So something that we often look past very quickly is that 2 times sine times 1/2 times alpha plus minus beta. Sine, the 1/2 times the alpha plus beta is inside the sine, but then you want to multiply it times cosine, which is outside the sine. And so interpreting that operator precedence can be a little tricky. But again, all of these are now represented in content math ML. Now, if I wanted to take a deep dive on one of these, copy it, get rid of the rest of them, paste it back in, and we could take a quicker look that this equation is parenthesis 1 plus x to the n equals 1 plus open fraction n times x over 1 factorial closed fraction plus open fraction n parenthesis n minus 1 closed parenthesis times x squared over 2 factorial and fraction plus dot, dot, dot. And the dot, dot, dot then gets represented as a symbol in the equation. So it would take me longer to copy, edit, and take a look at the math, at the Nemeth markup that's being created, the Nemeth Braille that's being created, than it does to just copy and paste it. Now, Microsoft does me dirty. If I want to select everything in the document, I can do that and copy everything. But then when I paste it into the Equalize Editor, Microsoft doesn't give me the nice presentation math ML that I was using just a minute ago. It gives me a plain text representation for the math because it thinks that that plain text needs to be embedded in a larger context. Well, no matter. I can come in here and select each one of these equations, type Control M, and convert each of these pieces of text, one line at a time, into the content math ML and the Nemeth Braille that I want. Just to give you a sense that not much in the way of smoke and mirrors going on here. It's just trying to deal with whatever it is that Microsoft Word wants to do as far as its math markup. But the idea is that if you've got math markup in Microsoft Word as presentation math ML, you can copy and paste it into the Equalize Editor as content math ML. I got a lot of things in the chat window. I should probably stop for a moment, Mark, and see if there are any questions that need to be put into the discussion here.
The basic wording that's happening in the chat right now is wow.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Any of you that are familiar with MathML, you might recognize that it's very easy to convert from content MathML, which represents the formulas, into presentation MathML that represents pretty pictures. And the Equalize editor has been able to do that for some time. But it's only recently that we've been able to add the capability of being able to interpret the presentation markup and produce content markup. Now, this presentation markup to content markup facility can be used not just with Microsoft Word, but also with other tools as well. Let me clear this document. And I want to switch over to another program that many people might be familiar with called MathPix. So let me see if I can get to my MathPix here. I'm going to have to, there we go. So I'm going to log into my MathPix account and take a look at a particular MathPix snip. A MathPix snip is just a capture of an image that's been loaded into MathPix, which can then be converted into math markup. The type of math markup that MathPix produces is it does an OCR on an image like a PDF, and it will produce ASCII math, it will produce LaTeX where appropriate. And so we're dealing with the same kind of presentational forms that we see coming out of Microsoft Word. Now, you know that you're a geek, a math geek. If I take a look at my snips here, let me go find this. Ah, yes. When your adult daughter sends you a math image, which is a limerick by a text message. So my math geek daughter, who is actually a music teacher, not a math geek, sent me this and thought it was funny. The image looks like this. It says a limerick. The limerick is open fraction 12 plus 144 plus 20 plus 3 times the square root of 4, all over 7 in the denominator, closed fraction, plus 5 times 11 equals 9 squared plus 0. Wait a minute, that's not a limerick, that's a math formula. Doesn't look like a limerick to you? We'll try this. A dozen, a gross, and a score, plus 3 times the square root of 4, divided by 7, plus 5 times 11 is 9 squared and not a bit more. Now, this image I found to be very funny because the math actually works and it actually matches the rhyme and meter of a limerick if you read it through. But for the purpose of this talk, what we want to focus on is the fact that this is an image. And so MathPix has to do OCR to recognize the text and the math and to produce something that you can then export to other programs. Now, if I were to hit the Edit Snip button, it will show me what markup it creates, and it looks a lot like plain text with a little bit of LaTeX inside of it. If you're familiar with LaTeX, LaTeX is almost a programming language that lets you describe what math looks like. It's another one of these languages that's good for producing pretty math pictures. But I can copy this markup, switch over to the Equalize Editor, and paste it into the Equalize Editor, and I get both the text, the math formula, and the limerick. And sadly, the Equalize Editor doesn't know anything about the proper rhyme and meter scheme of a limerick, but you can read it through and decide whether or not it makes sense to you from that perspective. But again, the idea is that the Equalize Editor can be used in connection with OCR tools like MathPix to convert PDF files into interactive Braille accessible forms. So we've taken a look at different features of the Equalize Editor. It supports file I/O, clipboard cut and paste, document export to HTML, PDF, and BRF formats. It supports input from HTML, MathML, ASCII math, Markdown, and LaTeX formats, and cut and paste from programs like Microsoft Word and MathPix, the OCR output that MathPix can produce. And all of these features taken together position the Equalize Editor as a tool that can help math document remediation in a lot of different contexts. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution because there is no way that one application can predict where you're getting your math documents from or how they're being produced or what formats, and can predict what type of format you need to convert it to. Maybe you've got a low vision user and you need an interactive document that you can then scale the font size. Maybe you have a dyslexic student that needs to feed this markup into other software that helps them deal with the print limitations that they may have. So all of these things can be done because the Equalize Editor will produce these documents using standard markup formats. All right, so now I've got a little bit of time left, and so what I'm hoping to do now is drop into a part of the talk where we can talk about questions a little bit more actively, and where I can show a little bit more deeply some of the capabilities of the Equalize Editor. Mark, are there any questions that I should handle before I drop into a couple more examples?
Not at this point, sir.
All right. So we've talked a lot about Nemeth Math. We've talked a lot about contracted UEB. We've talked a lot about entering Braille and so forth, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. The Equalize Editor supports Nemeth output and input translations for over 2,200 mathematical symbols. So if I go to the help, to the settings, open up all of the symbol palettes that are available, get these windows out of the way. All right. And everything from arithmetic, pre-algebra, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, chemistry, units of measurement, math alphabetic symbols, Greek, Hebrew, Cyrillic, bold italic font variations. These are all the symbols that are supported by the Equalize Editor, both for Braille input and Braille output. You may recognize some of these forms don't have standard Nemeth Braille corresponding Braille sequences defined. So in some cases, we've had to make some conservative extensions. I doubt that you might be able to find Greek sans serif bold italic fonts in Unicode. Not sure if Nemeth Braille actually gives me a correspondence for that, but you could get it by doing Greek is .46, bold is .456. I just happened to type a partial symbol, which is a variant delta, so that would be a .4.146 for D. So that's basically Greek, bold, variant, D is used for bold italic partial. And repeat that for, like I say, 2,200 symbols that are supported. So these symbols can be entered either by navigating these palettes, which these palettes are searchable by sighted users simply by virtue of the fact I can type in here and use the browser search mechanism. If I want to search for elements, then I can find my chemical elements palette, which has all the chemical element symbol on it. Sadly, there seems like that there are a whole lot more chemical elements on the periodic table than when I took chemistry, but that's neither here nor there. But we can actually insert these into a document to start building formulas that could be used to represent chemical equations and reactions. What I haven't been able to do yet is find an equally accessible way of searching these palettes for a Braille user. We'll still work on that. All right, a couple of examples since we mentioned chemistry. We support both chemical element symbols and SI units so that you can type in, for example, kilometers as a unit symbol. So if I type in km, it will recognize that as a kilometer and represent that in Nemeth Braille as shape U for a unit, km and shape. And then a Braille user could recognize this as an SI unit. Maybe you haven't thought about this problem, but can anybody tell me an SI unit whose symbol is the same as a chemical element symbol? Mark, you're gonna have to tell me if anybody is raising their hand here. Or did I stump the audience?
Well, you've stumped me.
All right, well, we'll give it away by opening a file that I created to show these off. See if I can go grab it. I found exactly 4 chemical element symbols that are also SI units. So capital Mg is both magnesium and megagram. PM, I think, is polonium. I may not be pronouncing that right, but is also petameters. TM is terameters, and I think tellurium or something like that. I don't even know some of these. Like I said, I don't think these were on the periodic table when I took chemistry. I think they added a few of them and snuck them in there. And PA is for pascals, and I think protactinium is that one. So how do we distinguish these? Well, in Braille, it's easy enough. We can just invent codes to say that if I want a chemical unit symbol, I can type shape U for units, and then shape X for chemistry. If I want to do this in Content MathML, nope, cancel. File, view source. I can use unit MG for the SI unit and CHMG for the chemical element and keep them apart that way so that I can produce the appropriate Braille. If I take a look at the presentation markup is almost exactly the same. They both use the symbol MG, but one of them is marked as being sourced from a unit and one from a chemical element. And so this approach allows me to take this document, and I can even save out the presentation markup, which no longer contains the content markup, and I can read it back in and preserve the semantics of what was created, whether it was a chemical element or an SI unit. So this kind of approach allows me to disambiguate lots of different mathematical formulas that might otherwise be difficult to distinguish. If you've ever tried to translate a piece of math into Braille and you didn't know what math you were translating, and so you didn't know what Braille to use, this is a way of approaching those kind of ambiguities. All right. Any other questions so far? I'll see if I can grab two more examples while we've got time.
This is sort of a question.
Yes.
Aunt Nancy says, not playing with this yet as a screen reader user. I'm guessing that if a colleague typed a worksheet into this, the beginning and beneath indicators would show as long as they were in math mode when typing, correct?
Correct. So if I type in math mode, I can type an equation like ax squared plus bx, if I could type the plus bx plus c equals 0 as a sighted person, and it includes the open Nemeth and closed Nemeth indicators around the Nemeth formula when it does, whether it's in displayed mode or in inline mode. Does that answer the question? Awesome. All right. Couple of other quick things just in terms of Braille entry. I've been using what's called QWERTY entry mode for the most part, where I'm acting as a QWERTY computer user, and the Equalize Editor acts as you would expect a math editor for a visual user interface to act. I can also use home row key mode to simulate a Braille display on my QWERTY keyboard. There's a third mode called Braille entry mode, where the Equalize Editor is now set up to expect computer Braille the way that it would be sent from a Braille display when it's configured to do so. So the Equalize Editor assumes if you've got a Braille display, you set it up to send computer Braille, and then if I type the letter B, that's going to provide me .12. I hit a space, and it will expand it to the word but. And similarly with other single letter contractions, you cannot quite have it just as you will like. And each time that I'm typing in the computer Braille, I can simulate that on my computer keyboard, of course, but I could also get it directly from the Braille keyboard. And as you type each word in succession from the Braille keyboard, it will expand the contracted form into the uncontracted form at each word boundary. So if I type B followed by a hyphen, it says, aha, I must be at the end of the word, expand that to the word but. If I also type, let's see, it's quote dash, I think. Nope. B comma dash. This is the longer, little bit longer dash. Double quote, comma, dash for a M dash. And so there's all sorts of knowledge in the editor for handling UEB contractions, for things like hyphens, for things like numeric fractions. I could type number sign A slash B, and that gives me the fraction 1/2, which is a single Unicode character. I could do /1/4, same, whoops, if I could type it right, /A/D gives me 1/4. But if I type number sign A/J, which is the fraction 1/0, there's not a Unicode character for that, so the Equalize editor will leave it as multiple characters. I could do the same thing in the UEB text support for things like accent marks. Let's see if I can remember some of my accent marks and type some of those in. If I type in the sequence ~*A in computer Braille, you would do that using your Braille display using dots 45, dots 16.1. That gives me an A with a grave accent, and so on. I could type in an A with an acute accent. I could type in, whoops, don't want caps lock on. Okay. I could type in ~@A for circumflex, ~A for a tilde, ~DA for a dotted A, umlaut under an A. I could even type a cedilla under a C. Or since I recently lived in Albuquerque, sometimes I like to put the cedilla underneath the letter K, giving me a quesadilla. I know I heard at least one person say they were from Los Angeles. I know they know about quesadillas out there, so I had to make sure that I could copy and paste and make sure that I could bring enough for everybody. So there's your dad joke for the day. Also, quotation marks. I can type single quote, a quote. I can type 8, a 0 for the straight double quote, ~8, a ~0 for the curly double quotes, ~8, a 0 for the curly single quotes, and so on. So the Equalize editor interprets each key as the computer Braille code for a Braille symbol, and then interprets the Braille symbol according to the rules of contracted UEB for literary text, or the rules for Nemeth Braille if they're typing math. All right, one final thing that I wanted to be able to show. We talked a little bit about this, but I didn't get a chance to show it yet. I'm going to create a new document here, and I'm going to load a file with some examples of, let's see, I want to load a couple of examples of LaTeX markup. You may be familiar with LaTeX markup as another way of representing presentational forms for mathematics. It has a lot of backslashes and control sequences and curly braces. So this is the formula that would represent the solution to the quadratic equation. I can type that into the Equalize editor and type Control M to convert it to content MathML. Using the same type of features that we were talking about before, we can say e to the I pi is -1. Oh, and here's an interesting chemistry formula that shows off some of the other chemical symbols we were looking at earlier. Transfinite cardinals using the letter Aleph from the Hebrew alphabet, and an integral sign, a definite integral with its solution. So clearly I could stay here all day long with these kinds of examples. I would love to be able to share everything that this editor could possibly do. I'm happy to stay around later and answer questions as we bring the meeting to a close. But I wanted to be able to emphasize that the Equalize editor is a free web-based application that allows Braille professionals to create, translate, remediate, and deliver Braille accessible interactive documents using UEB contracted text and Nemeth Braille math. And the user interface allows both sighted and Braille users equal access to that online interactive math content. So I promised that I would make it possible for you to see contact information. Again, my name is Sam Dooley. My company is Lake Pines Braille. And the Equalize editor can be accessed at lakepinesbraille.com/EE. My email address is sam@lakepinesbraille.com, and I would be happy to receive emails from anybody who's on this call. If you have additional questions, comments, suggestions, there's also a collection of YouTube videos on how to use the Equalize Editor on the YouTube channel Equalize Editor. And I'd be happy to have you subscribe to that channel, view the videos, and any suggestions for additional videos you'd like to see. I'm happy to receive those as well. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sam, this is Jan. I know that you mentioned it, but could you take just a second and show them the contractions, how you can turn those on and off?
Yes, I can. I knew that's where you would be headed.
Yeah, you
Thank
knew
you,
that's where I
Jan.
was going. Yes, because
Yes, I did.
guys, I think
Uh,
this is great for kids who've been adventitiously blinded and are maybe late Braille learners, in terms of being able to give them content that only has the contractions that they have learned and or are in the process of learning.
So what I can do is I can drop in here to the options page, like Jan mentioned, and I can turn off all Braille contractions. I can say now I can work with the Equalize Editor as if no contractions existed. So if I type the quick brown box, then everything is in uncontracted Braille. The word the is spelled out, quick is spelled out, the OW contraction is not used. But now if I go back to the settings page and drop into the Braille rules, let's see. The is a strong contraction, if I remember correctly. QK is a short form. Let's just do those two and see what we get. Well, we got the contraction for the word the, good. We got the contraction for the word quick, and we did not use the contraction for the OW contraction in the middle of the word brown. And that's exactly what we requested, under the assumption that those were the contractions that we were familiar with and able to use. And so as a student would typically progress through this, you'd say, oh, let's just turn on these first few that I've learned so far. And then I can interact with the program while maybe I'm learning the next set of contractions that I want to be able to learn. So Jan, thank you for reminding me of that.
Can you tell them again where to get to that? Just one more time.
Help, settings, and then under Braille rules.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
Yes, indeed, Sam. Thank you so much. This is as people have been saying in the chat, this is a game changer. It's just wow. Norma was asking about a blind student wanting to take engineering classes and if this would be helpful, which I can't imagine it not be, but what have you got to say about that?
What I have to say about that is that the engineering classes will stress the level of math that gets used more than any other classes, I think will. But there is support, as we showed just a little bit ago. Let me get back to that. On the series palette for things like summations, products, integrals, multiple integrals, even circle integrals, and other large operators that are used in such engineering courses. Many of the things that are on these palettes are motivated by corresponding operators or characters that are defined by the Unicode standard. So again, these will use standard Unicode concepts, standard MathML concepts to communicate these math formulas. So yes, I believe it would be helpful, but as with all of this, I would caution that, again, since math has such a large learning curve, the learning curve for finding the symbols to be used, how to encode them in Nemeth, and how to enter them in Nemeth, how to read them in Nemeth, and so on, it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. So I'm happy to help out if you've got a particular student in mind looking for particular symbols and making sure that those are going to work for you in a way that would be successful.
Thanks again, Sam. We're essentially out of time, but while I share the feedback code here, one of the questions was, I am so curious about your development process.
Good question. So am I. No, I'm teasing. The development process for this software is that it initially started as a project at IBM Research to provide a visual math editor that could be used in interactive student experiences in web pages in about the Netscape 3 timeframe. So this was mid-90s where some of this was originally being developed. And as it developed over time, I was introduced to my first Braille student and to my first Braille professional. I think Susan may still be on the call. Susan Osterhaus was a wonderful resource for teaching me where to find resources about the Nemeth Code and how the technology that I already had in place for handling both content and presentation MathML could be adapted to treat Nemeth Braille as first a presentation output language and also as an input language where each Braille symbol works the same way that keys on the keyboard do. So that's a quick view into the development process. This is all written in JavaScript, and it is not open source, but it is a free application that you can log in and use it on the website address that we gave you.
All right.
Anything else I can answer?
I'll bet there is, but so far nobody has put anything in. So we'll call it a day. Thank you again, Sam, so much for being here. And you guys have the contact info. We'll include that as well when we send out the recording information and other accompanying materials. Y'all have a good evening and a happy holiday, however you celebrate.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and attending.